Hey look, it's another documentary. Surprise, surprise, Chris is reviewing it. Now honestly, every time I think about backing off of reviewing documentaries, something new comes along that just grabs my attention. This time it's Monsters Inside, the 24 Faces of Billy Milligan on Netflix. This is a wild ride of a series, but is it worth the time involved to binge? In 1977, terror struck Ohio State University. Overwhelming evidence quickly led investigators to Billy Milligan, an aimless young man with a traumatic childhood and a criminal record. But upon his arrest, Billy had no memory of the assaults, and his mannerisms seemed to change right on the spot. A parade of psychiatrists diagnosed him with multiple personality disorder, eventually determining that as many as 24 distinct multiples existed within his mind. In a case that captivated the nation, their analysis anchored a first-of-its-kind legal defense strategy, but the drama was far from over. Now, I specifically avoided using certain words to classify and identify Billy Milligan's crimes because it can just cause instant demonetization. Just know that I am aware of the heinousness of what he did, and I'm not glossing over it. Director Olivier Megaton helms this series. Now first, what a cool name, right? It sounds like he's a transformer. But he's directed things like Taken 2 and 3, but also the very lackluster The Last Days of American Crime. Now I really enjoyed the way he framed and conducted the interviews in this. Normally in documentary interview footage, we have these over-the-shoulder shots that look like they belong on 60 Minutes. In this, Megaton places the subject fairly far away from the camera, putting them so that we can see them fully as they situate themselves within the chair. The shots then fluctuate between some zoomed-in footage and some medium shots to complement the long shots. I like how there's sometimes some establishing footage as the subjects kind of squirm and get themselves ready to be interviewed. It takes away some of the polish that's just helping to keep these people as real versus coming across as actors. Something I didn't enjoy was the overuse of this still image of Billy Milligan's face as it slowly zooms in on the screen. I mean, this was almost like the fallback shot, and it was employed quite a lot through all of the 4 episodes. It was a lazy editing technique to fill in for imagery they just probably didn't have. The story itself is pretty intriguing, as well as disturbing, disgusting, and frustrating. Through a bunch of interviews with childhood friends and family, we learn of Billy's upbringing, shedding light on a lot of occurrences that could have helped to shape his older self. The story is told in an interesting way, especially as we get to learn about the crimes and the investigation. Now, while the story accounts are being built up, investigators, journalists, and then medical experts weigh in to get to what the truth actually is or was. Plus, when this was going on in the late 70s, the medical community is just beginning to unravel the mysteries of multiple personalities. And then there are the added complexities of the legal system in relation to the psychological diagnosis. I love the central mysteries that weave throughout this documentary, in that it questions whether Billy's multiple personalities were actually controlling his actions, or if they were just a convenient cover for a brilliant sociopath. The series is 4 episodes, which each of them add about an hour, and while I really enjoyed all of the information, I think the show did drag for me. I ended up watching over 2 days just because there was so much to unpack. And then honestly, sometimes the content and then the delivery were just really dry, which then started to bore me by the presentation. I would have enjoyed this to be more compressed and then shorter. Now, I don't want any key portions cut or shortened, but the show as a whole felt like the story could have been unfolded in just a more efficient manner. Something I really enjoyed were the videotaped interviews with Billy Milligan. It was intriguing to watch as he'd switch personalities. Now, whether or not you believe him, and I do believe there is a lot of room for skepticism here, the footage is entertaining, and you might find yourself focusing in really closely to see if you can find any tells that are going to let you in on the truth. There are a lot of frustrating and sad aspects to the case, which I thought were depressing at times. I mean, given the context of those crimes, this was never going to be a feel-good documentary. I mean, I didn't leave it fully depressed, but I was frustrated because justice just wasn't achieved for everybody. So overall, from a true crime perspective, this is engaging and informative. The delivery isn't always as compelling as I'd like, making it difficult to want to binge, but the content itself, though, is fascinating. I really enjoyed the interviews as well as the camera work to capture those interviews. I also love the breadth of subjects that the filmmakers were able to secure, which gives us a very well-rounded perspective of Billy Milligan and much of what went into crafting his psyche. While this may not be at the top of your binge list, it is worth checking out at some point, especially if you're into true crime. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and some terrible descriptions of violence, including sexual violence. I recommend checking out Monsters Inside, the 24 Faces of Billy Milligan on Netflix when you are looking for a new documentary to watch. So were you familiar with this case? I'm curious if this documentary brings to light any new information. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.